get with that kind of gumption.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm feeling your pain, my friend, and I appreciate your phone call.
Sure, no problem. But let me just say, I'm with you with the whole Trump thing. There's so much craziness going on, and the amount of time spent on that. I don't even watch the news anymore because it's just more of the same. It's like you already know the outcome of a game. It's like every time something comes up, you know where it's going, and so it's just like I don't want to have to hear any more of it. You know, it's just mind numbing.
Yeah, that's. Thanks for the phone call. I'm glad you said that. It's a challenge for those of us that do these radio shows to know how much of it to talk about, for that matter, because all of us need a break, and yet it's the President of the United States acting unhinged. So how can you not pay attention to that? It's a real tough one. I appreciate your phone call. I'll tell you what, it was startling last night. It wasn't the president, it wasn't even the Cubs game. Did you see Gordon Hayward fall in the Boston Celtics Cleveland Cavaliers game?
I saw the still, and I couldn't even watch the video.
It's one of the most violent injuries you'll ever see in sport. It's one of those instances where the guy goes up, comes down, his leg does something that legs cannot do. And what's the most telling part of that is, I don't want you to look at the pictures or watch the video if you don't want to, but a lot of the pictures that are posted show Gordon Hayward of the Boston Celtics, the $100 million man who's going to lead them to the promised land, right? And there he is 5 minutes into the new season with a career, or at least with a season-ending injury. And what you see is the faces of the people in the first few rows of the crowd, the people with the good seats that are right there on the floor. They are horrified. Their expressions are so telling.
And I saw stills of the players too, in a
walking away
or in a communal embrace, trying to deal with it.
Well, God bless the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron James was there consoling him. You know, I mean, this is a young man in life-threatening kind of pain, and it's not about basketball then. You know, it's just about that kid suffering. So that's too bad. It's 1:31. We'll pause here. Steve's going to do the news. Afterwards, Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States, lightens things up on WGN. Thank you, Steve. A Halloween tradition on the John Williams Show. We like to play a song from a group called the Shags. The Shags, an all-girl group from Indiana in the 60s. This monster hit is called It's Halloween. Let's take a listen.
Why even Dracula will be there.
That's right. Why even Dracula will be there. It's 1:42, and that's the Shags. I know you enjoyed it, and don't worry, there's plenty more of that to come over the next 14 days, 2 weeks starting today, here on the John Williams Show. The Shags, It's Halloween. Thomas Jefferson is the third president of these United States. He joins us now on WGN Radio. President Jefferson, welcome to the show.
Good day to you, citizen.
Did you celebrate Halloween? Were you a big trick-or-treat guy?
You know, such a thing did not exist in my time. The closest we had was on the Christmas holidays, and on Boxing Day, on the day after Christmas, there was sort of a reversal where the servants played the masters, and the masters gave food and gifts and waited on the lower classes, and tricks were played, and the kind of trick-or-treat tradition existed then, but not on All Hallowed Eve.
Yeah. It's too bad. It's kind of fun. Everybody goes for candy these days. It's a really big holiday in America, maybe like our second most in terms of dollars spent holiday in the United States, bigger than the 4th of July, Independence Day, Thanksgiving. It's Christmas and Halloween, man.
I wouldn't want to be a killjoy, but I would have been very skeptical of any event, even a secular event that's based on a saint's day. You know, the Catholic tradition going back to the early Middle Ages celebrated the putative birth dates of saints, and the Protestant Reformation swept all that away, and the Enlightenment looked upon it with a sort of fairy tale sadness.
Yeah. you're way overthinking it. It's mostly just about candy and dressing up and going to parties. Like, what would your favorite candy be? If you were handing out candy, if I came up to Monticello and it's like, oh, this is the Jeffersons, whew, that was a hike, but here we are, and we open up the door, what would you be handing out?
We might have had a bit of licorice. We really would have probably served baked goods, and I doubt that would be very acceptable in your time.
That is a loser house. The kids walk all the way up the hill, and you're handing out some muffins or something. That is not getting it done. They want the big candy bars.
But if they came to Monticello, I would invite them in and show them my entry hall with artifacts from the Lewis and Clark expedition and some previously unpublished maps of Central and South America and some bones from the mastodon and the woolly mammoth, and they might find that just fascinating.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. People would look skeptically on your motives or intentions, I think, if you invited the children in and said, hey, let's go to the map room. That doesn't
They might be fascinated by my calendar clock. I had a clock that not only told the time of the day, but the day of the week. It had some weights, and those weights resembled sort of a cantaloupe or a cannonball, and they would move down along the wall on a chain, and on the wall I had placards pasted that said Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. I think all children of any time or place would be fascinated by that.
Somebody just sent us a text. Again, President Jefferson's on the phone. We asked him to join us today just to remind you that you and I will be on stage at the Elgin Community College December 2nd, and that tickets to our conversation are available at wgnradio.com/events right now.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, so much that I almost even don't want to address it here. We're going to talk on stage soon enough. I will tease you at least with some of the topics I will address. But this texter writes, asks Mr. Jefferson what he thought of his portrayal in the play Hamilton. Have you seen Hamilton on stage yet, sir?
Sir, I have not, but I'm aware of it, and I understand that they have aggrandized Colonel Hamilton, who was born in obscurity in the Caribbean and was a man who wanted a hereditary monarchy for the United States and never saw a war that he didn't like. And they have done that by denigrating me and making me appear to be a duplicitous Machiavellian figure. So I have to say, I regret that sort of a portrayal. Hamilton would have been a great Prime Minister of England, but he was a very poor American in my view.
We're trying to figure out who the right Americans are to honor with statues. Every now and then we go through this, but, should we have one of Christopher Columbus? Should we have one of Balbo? Which turns out that this Italian Balbo was maybe not a person who had America's best interest at heart, and yet in Chicago we have a street named after him, and for that matter we have statues of him, to say nothing of the problem of Confederate statues in the United States. What would the Founding Fathers say about honoring these people that way?
Well, we saw things a little bit differently. We still had a great deal of respect for Columbus because he inadvertently happened upon the New World and set in motion a set of historical dynamics of really extraordinary human importance, not just for the people of the emerging United States, but for all of the peoples of the world. We did not judge quite as severely as I think you are now judging, and I wonder if it's a very good idea. If you continue down this path of removing every American figure who you can find objectionable from a 21st century sense of righteousness, I doubt that my statues will be able to survive that movement, and maybe Monticello will be plucked down too.
Well, that's what they say. What about Jefferson? What about Washington? And so on and so forth. Here's another question that's resonating in current times. I don't know if you have anything to say about it today. You might think about this for our December 2nd conversation. You didn't happen to call the families of the men who died in the Revolutionary War and offer your condolences, did you?
No, we had no telephones, but I did write to the families of some of the fallen when I was serving as the governor of Virginia. I wouldn't have presumed to do so in any other situation, and while I was president, I was able for 8 years to preside over peace and prosperity with very little death and destruction anywhere in the New World. But I do think that we have a special duty. The gravest thing that a president can ever do without any question is to send your children, your sons, into harm's way. And if those children go at the behest of the president, that's a tremendously dramatic responsibility for that person. And if that child or miscarries, if he dies, if he's killed in war, if he's captured, the president bears some responsibility for that, because the president is the only figure in our culture who is elected by all of the Americans, and he's the only one who can send troops into harm's way. So I think that the president has an enormous moral responsibility to keep the peace. And if he can't keep the peace for whatever reason and is forced to enter a war, he must do so with the deepest sense of somberness and misgiving. And he must then make sure that he pays the fullest possible respect to anyone who dies under his watch.
Thomas Jefferson's on the phone. How often do you get to say that? We'll pause here. By the way, my number's 312-981-7200 if you want to text or call in with a question. I'll ask this, and we'll get the answer on the other side, if you don't mind, Mr. President, and that is, you guys did not anticipate the 25th Amendment, I don't think. I wonder what you think about it as it is today. We're talking to President Thomas Jefferson. He and I will be on stage, as we often do. On December 2nd, we'll be at Elgin's Community College. If you want tickets to see President Jefferson on stage, and you really will enjoy and benefit from this, go to WGNradio.com/events right now before, and we're only doing one show with President Jefferson, so act now before the show sells out. What would you make of the 25th Amendment, mental incompetence? Should we execute that, or what do you think of that?
You know, there were only a dozen amendments in the course of my time, and the bulk of those were the Bill of Rights, which was, in a sense, a second constitution. So the Constitution had not been amended very much at the time of my death in 1826. We did have some difficulties with this issue, but we wouldn't have known how to handle it. Of course, the government wasn't as important in my time as it is in yours, and there wasn't so much a sense of urgency. But George Washington, how shall I put this carefully? He's a man I revere, but by the time he left office, he had lost some of his mental acuity, and that made him, I suppose you would say Alzheimer's today, but that term did not exist in my time. But we worried about his mental preparedness in the last year or so of his second term. And John Adams was so erratic, so odd, so irascible, volatile, unable to maintain a kind of steadiness of purpose, that even people of his own party worried that he was perhaps going insane. Turns out it was just his character. It's just the way John Adams was. But I must say that this is a very, I think, a dangerous doctrine in that amendment, because the president is elected by the people, and the people have decided. And I think it takes a very extraordinary crisis for anyone to void an election.
That's interesting. So you say unless they really go off the deep end, just being extremely unpopular should not be sufficient reason to throw them out, huh?
That certainly should not be a reason to throw someone out. But even if someone is not at his mental best, that does not necessarily mean that you eliminate him from the presidency. I think that is a very dangerous doctrine in the republic. It could be misused for partisan purposes. Factions could attempt to characterize the president as erratic. And remember, in our system, we have three branches. They check and balance each other. That's why our system is so strong. And the legislative branch in a republic is meant to be the most important of the three branches. And so in some sense, the president is much less important to the sanctity and the stability of the country than the legislature.
Ron on line one wants to know what you think of John Brown, and this texter wants to know what you think of mental health. They understand that you were maybe clinically depressed at times. What should we do about mental health in this country? I don't have time for either of those. We're out of time now, President Jefferson, but this is kind of the line I'll take you on maybe when we get on stage in December.
I was never depressed, but I did have times of